The character of Matt Helm tends to draw a lot of comparisons to James Bond. That's partially by design, at least by the time Helm made it to the big screen in 1966's The Silencers, played by Dean Martin. But it's also partially down to the genre that the two spies inhabit. Espionage novels are their own genre, but with their two-fisted, bone-breaker action stars bedding a long line of completely interchangeable partners, Helm and Bond fit more precisely into the realm of men's adventure, a genre whose true heyday stretched from the 1940s to the 1970s, but that continued to be popular in first-run paperbacks well into the 1990s, with some series still running to this day. Pioneered in magazines from Fawcett and Muncie, the trademarks of men's adventure are exotic travel, fighting wild animals, and taking on villains who are easily identifiable as villains because, well, there's a war going on and they're the enemy. Bond wasn't exactly the lantern-jawed, Nazi-punching hero of what the publishing industry called men's sweat magazines, but he was, nevertheless, cut from the same cloth. He was bold, blunt, and his enemies were still easily recognizable as villains because, while the uniforms of World War II may have been gone, they still identified as international terrorists, madmen, and gun runners. They were hidden in plain sight, but once you saw them, you knew them for what they were. By now, a lot has been said about how Bond has been somewhat softened from his depiction in the books. But no matter how much it's been pointed out, if you've never picked up one of Fleming's original Bond stories, you probably still have no idea of just how brutal and nihilistic the stories can be. Fleming was not subtle, and the initial movies still carry that whiff of the men's sweat magazines, although viewed from a slightly more cartoony lens. But by the end of the 60s, the Bond films had started to soften a bit and find more humor in the main character's personality. And it's hard not to see that as just a little bit of influence from the Matt Helm movies. Born in Uppsala, Sweden on March the 24th, 1916, Donald Bengtsson Hamilton was one of 4 children. His father would move to the United States ahead of the family to seek work in America, and after Dr. Hamilton secured a position teaching at Harvard University, Donald would follow in 1924, accompanying his mother and his 3 sisters on the ocean voyage on the SS Stockholm. Growing up, young Donald loved camping, hunting, fishing, and sailing, and also loved telling stories to his sisters. He expected to follow in his father's footsteps, but after beginning a pre-med degree at the University of Chicago, he decided he wasn't cut out for the medical field. Instead, he would graduate in 1938 with a degree in chemistry. When the United States entered World War II, Hamilton enlisted in the Navy Reserve, working as a chemist, a position that he kept after the end of the war. In honor of Hamilton's Swedish roots, let me take a moment to point out to audiences outside of the United States that the job of chemist in the USA is very different than a chemist elsewhere. In America, a chemist is almost always somebody working with chemicals in a science lab, and not the guy who sells you condoms. The steady work not only allowed him to indulge in his favorite pastimes while also starting a family with his wife Kathleen Stick, but it also allowed him to begin dabbling in freelance writing. He wrote prolifically and was rejected often, but in 1946, he would sell 2 articles on the same day, an article for Yachting magazine, for which he was paid $75, and a love story to Collier's. Collier's paid him 10 times what Yachting magazine did, and Hamilton decided that fiction was the job he had always wanted. He quit his day job and focused on writing, and in 1947 he published his first novel, Date with Darkness. Hamilton did well with his writing, well enough to support his family, which by this time included 4 children, 2 sons and 2 daughters. He not only sold his writing to magazines and novels to his publishers, but he also sold adaptation rights to film and television, with some of his stories serving as the basis for episodes of CBS's Suspense, and his novel Smoky Valley becoming the Glenn Ford vehicle, The Violent Men. By 1956, living exclusively off of his work as a writer, Hamilton's family would move to Santa Fe, New Mexico. In 1959, Hamilton became fascinated by Ian Fleming's Bond novels and decided that he wanted to give the genre a try himself. The result was a manuscript that would become the first Matt Helm novel, Death of a Citizen. Originally written as a one-off story, it was Hamilton's editor at Fawcett who encouraged him to rewrite the original ending, which had suggested that Helm might be able to return to a quiet civilian life, into one where Helm's family is instead terrified by the formerly mild-mannered Matt having been transformed into a ruthlessly efficient killer whom they have just watched torture a man to death. Over the course of the next 4 years, Hamilton would write and publish 7 Matt Helm novels with Fawcett, each one becoming a sales and critical success. Eventually, the series would reach 28 novels, published between 1960 and 1993. As the magazine market he had been frequenting shrank dramatically, the Helm novels became Hamilton's major focus.
Like old times.
Yeah, especially with that body on the floor.
What did we do with her?
Well, you put her on ice, let ice take care of her.
And what happens when the maid walks in the morning?
You're right. Let's put her in my bed so we don't arouse suspicion.
In 1964, the third James Bond movie hit theaters. It was called,
Goldfinger.
That's right, Goldfinger. Filmed on a then extravagant budget of $3 million, it recouped its costs within the first 2 weeks of release and went on to gross $23 million in the United States and $46 million worldwide in its initial release. Adjusted for inflation today, that would be close to $500 million. At the time, it held the Guinness World Record for the fastest grossing film. It would go on to become the first Bond film to win an Academy Award, with Norman Wanstall taking home the award for Best Sound Effects Editing. Art director Ken Adam would be nominated for a BAFTA for Best British Art Direction in Color for his work on the film, and while he lost that year to Beckett art director John Bryan, he was also nominated and won that same year for his art direction in black and white on Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. Goldfinger was a bona fide phenomenon, and it's little wonder that every studio wanted to get its own spy into the cinemas. The spy arena was about to get very, very crowded with Flint, Christy O'Hara, Burke Wilkinson, and that's even without considering that spies were becoming a big part of television entertainment as well. With the world going spy crazy, film producer Irving Allen hopped on a plane with his newly purchased paperback of Donald Hamilton's Death of a Citizen, and 24 hours later, he had Hamilton's signature on a contract giving him the rights to produce a film based on the character. Allen believed in the character so much that he spent his own money to secure the rights to the first 8 Matt Helm books, then took the series to Columbia Pictures to get the studio behind him. Allen and Columbia each had, in particular, an interest in getting into the spy business with a Bond competitor. For Columbia, it was a classic case of having turned down the series that went on to build an empire. They had been approached to produce Bond films long before Dr. No, but had turned it down because they weren't sure that the novel series' sales would translate to the box office. And for Allen, the notoriously brusque movie professional had also turned down Bond, having gone to a brief meeting with Fleming and his agent where he told the two, bluntly, "In my opinion, these books are not even good enough for television." Especially rankling was that Allen wasn't even the producer who was supposed to meet with Fleming, but instead he was covering for his then producing partner, Cubby Broccoli, who would split from Allen shortly after and pick up the still available Bond film rights, launching a film franchise that is still running to this day, and in the process, making Allen look and feel like a total putz.
Hey, Mac, I'm glad you dropped by. I want you to meet some cute little...
Nah, never mind.
Hey, but I'm paying those girls double time. Do you know what it costs to double time all those girls?
Yeah. Get in.
Oh, okay.
While Allen and Columbia wanted a competitor for Bond, it didn't take long for them to realize that nobody wanted to compete one-on-one with James Bond, or, more accurately, they didn't want to compete with Sean Connery. In just 3 years, the former bar bouncer Connery had climbed to a position where he was considered the epitome of masculine cool. Irving Allen wanted Paul Newman for the role of Matt Helm, but Newman wasn't interested. Columbia approached a string of hot television actors of the day, but couldn't get a single one to sign on, and nobody in charge of the production seemed interested in Donald Hamilton's opinion, which was that Have Gun Will Travel star Richard Boone was the only actor suited to portray Matt Helm. Columbia kept feeding a line to the press that they had, in fact, turned down a line of stars who wanted the lead in their film, but it was the exact opposite. They didn't succeed in finding a bankable star for the movie until they decided to drop all pretense of being a serious contender for the throne of top spy, hiring the Pink Panther co-writer Maurice Richlin to write a lighthearted comic take on the material, and running ads looking for talent to play the Matt Helm franchise's answer to the Bond girls, the Slaymates.
Hello, boys. Have a good night's rest. I missed you.
With Matt Helm's rough edges sanded down and a cheeky, naughty sense of humor emerging, the role finally picked up America's favorite liquored-up Lothario, Dean Martin.
In our civilized business, this is the traditional time to offer you a cigarette or some liquid refreshment, perhaps. But since we are professional people on limiting time schedules, I suggest that we dispense with such amenities.
Oh, no, let's not dispense with any of those things.
Hamilton was less than pleased to see his suspense thrillers turned into comedies, saying that he felt the idea of turning it into a spoof was a cop-out. But years later he would admit that for all of his complaining he was, as he put it, crying all the way to the bank. The money was good, and it still spent just fine, and he could continue to write the books exactly the way he wanted to write them. So, in the end, what did it hurt? Dean Martin's Helm was a considerably softened version of the character. Where the novel's Matt Helm reflected his creator's life as a working writer with a family and a taste for outdoors adventure, Dean Martin as Matt Helm was a swinging bachelor and a photographer, snapping pictorials of an endless line of pinup girls. While the novel's Helm responded to his dark past re-emerging by abandoning his family and throwing himself once more into the world of professional killers, Martin's Helm was called out of retirement and reluctantly left a lavish life of luxury, complete with a bubble bath-filled lap pool, in order to track down the villainous Sung Se, played by Victor let me check my notes. Victor Buono as Tung Se. This has not aged well in many ways, you guys.
And everything is A-OK.
Hamilton may not have been thrilled with the changes to his work, but audiences were. Producer Irving Allen credited the timing of the movie as well. Not only were they releasing at the height of James Bond's popularity, but between shooting the film and releasing it, The Dean Martin Show premiered on NBC and hit the top of the ratings. With a full media blitz behind it, anticipation was high for The Silencers, and audience response at a test screening was so positive that Columbia executives reportedly signed a contract for 2 follow-up films on the spot. On a budget of $3.5 million, the movie brought in $16 million in domestic box office, $7 million in print rental fees from theaters showing the movie, and around $1 million from selling the rights for the television premiere. There would ultimately be 3 more movies in the Matt Helm series, with the last one being 1968's The Wrecking Crew. A 5th movie was teased in the credits, but 6 months after the film was released, Martin's co-star Sharon Tate would be murdered by the Manson family, and Martin was reportedly so devastated by Tate's death that he would refuse to return for another installment in the series, and, reportedly, Tate's death was also a major contributor to his decision to retire from public life altogether shortly after. But it has been argued that, while the series came nowhere near the franchise lifespan of James Bond, it had a major impact on the genre as a whole, not the least of which is that it is partially credited with the more light-hearted direction the Bond series would take as it headed into the 1970s. By taking a character from a novel who was a cold-blooded psychopath and recasting him as a humorous, charismatic playboy, the Matt Helm series created a playbook for increasing the appeal of a men's adventure character by polishing the edges and putting on a smirk for the camera. And for decades afterward, it wasn't uncommon to see men's adventure novel series such as Warren Murphy and Richard Sapir's The Destroyer novels make their way to the screen in softened forms, often with tongue planted firmly in cheek, such as 1985's Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins.
Don't you think we should be introduced first?
You're Matt Helm.
It's good enough for me.
The success of lighthearted takes on men's adventure characters is a testament to a fact that is the bane of screenwriters everywhere. Not everything that works on the page will work on the screen. Some of this is because we don't get the internal monologue of a character when we move from the written word to a visual performance. We don't get that insight into why they do the things they do. And part of it is because a segment that seems cool to its audience on the page suddenly becomes vicious, twisted, and just plain sick when it's on the screen. 1985's Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins has a similar background to both Bond and Helm. It's a light-hearted adventure movie about what its producers called a red, white, and blue-collar Bond. The Vietnam veteran is trained by a martial arts guru who teaches him how to dodge bullets and run across the top of water. It's a silly movie. The source material for Remo Williams' The Adventure Begins is Warren Murphy and Richard Sapir's The Destroyer series of men's adventure novels. With over 150 novels in the series to date, the story is that of a Newark, New Jersey cop who is framed and sentenced to death, but who winds up having his death faked so that he can be trained as an assassin. The martial arts guru is indeed there in the book, but instead of training Remo to do superhuman stunts, he teaches Remo the fastest ways to kill a human being using just his hands. And in one scene from the first of the series, 1971's created The Destroyer, that I have certainly never been able to forget since reading it, the new government-sanctioned assassin kills a security guard, then laughs as he severs the already dead guard's carotid artery, drains him of blood, shoves the corpse into a commercial clothes dryer, and starts it up. I don't think you can expect an audience to feel sympathetic toward your hero after they've watched him do that on screen. But on the page, it apparently launched a long-running series, one that currently has yet another film adaptation reportedly in the works with a screenplay from the Monster Squad scribe Shane Black. Oh, all right, he also wrote Predator and Iron Man 3. I just wanted to do a callback to the Dracula countdown.
Please, Mr. Helm, stupidity has a tendency to make me impatient.
Similarly, there's Jack Reacher from author Lee Child, who has appeared in 26 novels and a number of additional short stories. The first novel features a nice page-long description of how easy Jack Reacher knows it is to crush someone's nose with his forehead. It's violent, but very realistically violent. But by the time it was made into a movie starring Tom Cruise, well... Or how about Jason Bourne, star of 15 novels, 3 of them written by creator Robert Ludlum, and 12 more written after Ludlum's death by Eric van Lustbader. In the novels, Bourne was a Foreign Service officer who was driven by a desire to avenge his wife and children's death at the hands of an unknown government's bomber during the Vietnam War. He sought out and enlisted with a super-secret Black Ops organization that trained him to become a member of an anti-Viet Cong death squad, and he was ultimately enlisted by a CIA Black Ops squadron to take on the role of an infamous international assassin in order to get close to and eliminate other assassins. Kinda rude, if you ask me. In 1988, Richard Chamberlain starred as Jason Bourne in an adaptation of The Bourne Identity for television that focused more on being a slow burn thriller. But the more familiar version of Bourne today is the film franchise starring Matt Damon that launched with 2002's The Bourne Identity. In that far more action-oriented adventure series, Damon's Bourne is removed from any personal responsibility for his actions. His wife and children are written out of his backstory, and Bourne becomes a soldier in the United States Army who was recruited directly out of the services by the CIA, one who originally turned down the recruiter's offer, but who we then learn was the victim of CIA skullduggery intended specifically to get Bourne into their program. Instead of his elite assassin capabilities being something that Bourne specifically asked for and wanted to train for, they become something implanted in him by unethical CIA operatives who waterboarded and tortured Bourne to destroy his personality before rebuilding him as the person they wanted him to be. Proving that even when a film franchise prides itself on being a gritty, realistic take on the espionage genre, it almost always looks at the original protagonist and says, hey, audiences won't like this guy if they have to actually watch him do all of this stuff. Let's maybe pretty him up a bit.
But don't go in.
The first 3 Matt Helm movies feature Beverly Adams in the role of Helm's personal assistant, Lovey Cravesit, Matt Helm's answer to Bond's Moneypenny. By the 3rd film, the producers started voicing concern that the then recent star of How to Stuff a Wild Bikini was somehow starting to look too old to be on screen with Dean Martin. Martin at the time was a young and spry 50 years old, while at the ripe old age of 21, it's a wonder that Adams didn't crumble into dust under the strain of merely walking onto the set. They sent Adams to London for an extensive makeover, pairing her with stylists, makeup artists, and fashion designers, telling her that they were trying to make her look more distinguished than the Matt Helm slaymates, turn her into less of a potential romantic interest and more of an equal foil. You know, Leonardo DiCaprio at least lets him get to 25 before he kicks him out. And so it was that Beverly Adams wound up in the styling chair of actor-turned-stylist Vidal Sassoon, who would ask her out on a date, and, after a whirlwind romance, the two would wind up marrying, with Adams retiring from acting before the 4th Helm film could begin production. She and Sassoon would remain married until 1981 and would write and publish 2 books together. Thanks for checking out the video. Aside from James Bond, who's your favorite movie or television spy? There's a lot to choose from, but I think I'm going to go with number 6 from The Prisoner. Drop into the comments below and let me know. And for our super secret Cool Kids Club code word today, let's go with amore, as in when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie. Until next time, watch like it means something.